You're an embarrassment, Dad. My daughter's voice didn't crack. It sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced those words until they stopped hurting her to say. I've worked too hard to build this life, she continued. The cameras will be everywhere. Diplomats, royal families, international press. I just can't have people asking questions about you. I stared at the navy suit hanging in my closet, the tailor's tag still attached. I'd bought it 3 months earlier, the day Claire announced she was marrying Prince Nicholas of Laurentia. I'd imagined standing proudly beside my daughter. Instead, I stood barefoot in my bedroom while she explained why I wasn't welcome at her own wedding. I understand, I said quietly. There was a long silence. Then she added the sentence that stayed with me long after the call ended. You've always loved me, Dad. So please do this for me. The line went dead. 1 hour after the ceremony began, 3 black SUVs rolled slowly into my gravel driveway in rural Vermont. Men in dark uniforms stepped out with military precision. Not police. Royal guards. One approached my porch and removed his cap before knocking. Mr. Walter Hale. His Majesty requests your presence immediately. My name is Walter Hale. I'm 69 years old. I've buried 1 wife, raised 1 daughter, and until that morning, I believed I'd already lived through the hardest day of my life. I was wrong, because the hardest part wasn't being excluded from my daughter's wedding. It was realizing she genuinely believed I deserved to be. My wife Margaret died when Claire was 9. Breast cancer, fast and cruel. Nobody teaches you how to become both parents overnight. I burned dinners, forgot school forms, braided Claire's hair so badly her teachers secretly fixed it before class pictures. Claire laughed every time. Those small moments carried me through years I wasn't sure I'd survive. I taught high school history outside Montpelier. The paycheck wasn't much, so I tutored evenings, delivered furniture during summers, restored old clocks with a friend. Every extra dollar had one destination, Claire. She never heard me complain, because she wasn't supposed to. Claire was brilliant. Scholarships, top of her class, then graduate school at Georgetown. I remember helping her move into her apartment in Washington. I'll make you proud, Dad, she said. You already have. For years, she called nearly every Sunday. Slowly, the calls grew shorter, then less frequent. Work, she'd say, travel, meetings overseas. What I didn't notice was how success was changing something else entirely. The first time she mentioned Prince Nicholas, she sounded happier than I'd heard in years. He's different, she said. Laurentia was a small constitutional monarchy in Europe, and Nicholas was its eldest son. She promised they'd visit Vermont. They never did. Royal schedules, official events, security concerns. Then one afternoon, my television flashed breaking news. Prince Nicholas engaged to American diplomat Claire Hale. Neighbors brought pies. Former students congratulated me at the grocery store. Then, nothing. No invitation, no phone call. I told myself international weddings took time. Eventually, I stopped checking the mailbox every afternoon. About 6 weeks before the ceremony, I called her, just to ask if she needed help. She hesitated. The palace communications team thinks, she started, then stopped. Just tell me, I said. They think your lifestyle doesn't fit the image they're building. I laughed, thinking she was joking. My lifestyle? You still live in that old farmhouse, drive a 20-year-old truck, wear work boots everywhere. She didn't laugh. Then came the words, "You'll embarrass me." Not the palace, not the royal family. Me, her father, her embarrassment. The wedding morning arrived bright and warm. I made coffee, fed the birds by Margaret's old garden, took the suit from the closet, pressed the sleeves one last time, then hung it back up. I wore my flannel shirt instead, and spent the afternoon repairing the fence behind the barn while the television played coverage. I turned the volume off. The silence felt kinder. Around noon, I sat on the porch with Margaret's wedding photo. "I hope she's happy," I whispered. I wasn't angry yet. Mostly I was grieving, because somewhere between the little girl who believed I could fix anything and the woman walking toward royalty, I'd become someone she couldn't bear to stand beside. Then, exactly 1 hour after the ceremony began, tires crunched across my gravel driveway. The lead officer climbed my porch, removed his cap, and bowed. "His Majesty deeply regrets a terrible mistake. He requests your presence immediately." Then one more sentence that stopped my heart. "The wedding cannot continue without you." "I think you have the wrong Walter Hale," I said. "I assure you, sir, His Majesty knows exactly who you are." Another guard stepped forward with a garment bag. "We've brought a suit in your size." "I already have one," I said. "His Majesty specifically requested we bring this anyway." The drive to the small regional airport took 20 minutes. No sirens, just 3 SUVs moving quietly through roads I'd driven thousands of times. One of the guards introduced himself. Captain Ross Dillard, Army Rangers, now serving the royal household. "Why does the king want me?" I asked. "I believe His Majesty wishes to answer that himself," he said. That wasn't an answer. It was confirmation that something enormous had been kept from me. At the airport, a royal helicopter waited, engines running. I was a retired teacher who argued with the hardware store cashier about wood stain. Now, strangers were saluting me. Boston appeared beneath us less than an hour later. Police escorts lined downtown streets. Satellite trucks crowded every parking lot. Captain Dillard handed me a tablet. Every network carried the same headline: "Royal wedding delayed under mysterious circumstances." Inside the cathedral, my daughter had no idea I was on my way. I'd learn later what happened after I left my farmhouse. King Aldrich had leaned toward Prince Nicholas during the opening ceremony, and the prince's face changed instantly. Within seconds he stood. The orchestra stopped. Claire thought someone had collapsed. Instead, the king calmly announced a brief delay. Royal security disappeared from the cathedral, including Captain Dillard, sent to find me. As the helicopter crossed the harbor, memories I'd spent 40 years burying pushed their way back. Europe, winter, gunfire. Some memories never truly disappear. They simply wait. In 1983, I wasn't Professor Walter Hale. I was 25, restless, on a graduate fellowship studying European political history in Laurentia. Back then, a country almost nobody outside Europe had heard of. One rainy afternoon, my professor asked if I'd accompany visiting officials on a historical tour, a translator having canceled. I had no idea one of those officials was Crown Prince Aldrich, a man in his early 30s with an easy smile and a habit of asking too many questions. By week's end, we'd shared dozens of conversations about American democracy and baseball, which he couldn't understand at all. The attack came on a freezing December evening. Our small delegation had just left a museum, snow on the sidewalks. I heard what sounded like a car backfiring, then screaming. 3 masked gunmen emerged from a delivery van. I saw one shooter raising his rifle toward Aldrich. There wasn't time to think. I shoved him sideways. The bullet meant for him hit my shoulder instead. Security overwhelmed the attackers within moments, but moments are long enough to change lives forever. When I looked up, Aldrich was kneeling beside me, hands pressed against my wound, repeating one sentence over and over. "You saved my life." The helicopter touched down on a secure pad beside the cathedral. "You should know one more thing," Captain Dillard said. "His Majesty has spent 40 years trying to repay a debt you never allowed him to." "I never wanted repayment," I said. "Then why now?" "Because today, someone forgot to tell the future queen who her father really is." The cathedral doors opened before I could say another word. Every conversation stopped instantly. Thousands of eyes turned. And, at the far end of the aisle, my daughter. Claire stood frozen beside Prince Nicholas, her bouquet slipping in trembling hands. She looked confused, then embarrassed, then frightened. I knew that expression. She wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of what everyone else was thinking. King Aldrich walked toward me like an old friend crossing a room after too many years apart. I reached out my hand. Instead, he embraced me tightly. The entire cathedral seemed to stop breathing. "I have searched for the right words for 40 years, he said quietly. "I still haven't found them." "You don't owe me anything, Aldrich." "No," he said. "I owe you everything." Prince Nicholas approached next, looking overwhelmed. "So, you're Walter. My father has spoken about you my entire life. He'd tell me courage wasn't inherited, it was chosen. I had never thought of myself as brave. Terrified, absolutely. Lucky, without question. Brave? Never. I had simply reacted." Claire finally found her voice. "Dad." It barely came out as a whisper. King Aldrich turned to face the guests. The cathedral went so quiet, I could hear someone crying near the back. Today was supposed to celebrate the union of two families. But there is a debt my family has carried for 4 decades. In December of 1983, terrorists attempted to assassinate the Crown Prince of Larenthia. One young American placed himself between me and certain death. He was shot saving my life. Claire's face turned white. Mr. Walter Hale refused every honor, every reward, every interview. He returned home and asked only to be left alone. "I wasn't trying to be noble," I interrupted. "I just wanted my life back." "Which is precisely why you deserved every honor you refused," the king said. A foreign correspondent stood. "Are you saying this gentleman saved the monarchy? Without Walter Hale, I would have died. There would have been no king, no Prince Nicholas, and very likely," he glanced at Claire, "no wedding today." Nearly the entire cathedral stood, simply out of respect. I wanted the floor to open beneath me. An attendant hurried forward with an elegant chair, placed beside the king, not behind him. I shook my head. "No." He looked almost offended. "You've already interrupted one wedding. Please don't argue with me today." "I don't belong there," I said. "My friend," he answered, "you have belonged beside my family for 40 years. I looked toward Claire. She couldn't meet my eyes, her shoulders shaking. For the first time since that awful phone call, I wasn't angry anymore. I simply saw my little girl, lost, ashamed, carrying a weight far heavier than I ever had. Nicholas quietly took her hand and led her toward me. "I never knew," she said. "Because I never told you," I said gently. "Why not?" "Because it wasn't the most important thing I'd ever done." "What was?" "Raising you." She burst into uncontrollable tears. "I'm so sorry, Dad." I stepped forward, placed both hands on her shoulders. "We'll talk later." Today is still your wedding. You're not angry, she said, searching my face. I've had 40 years to learn something, I told her. Life's too short to let pride steal the people you love. King Aldrich suggested postponing the ceremony another 30 minutes. An advisor objected, mentioning the broadcast. The broadcast can wait, the king said. My son's marriage can wait. But this family cannot. They led us into a private room behind the cathedral. Only 6 people entered. The king, Nicholas, Claire, Captain Dillard, myself, and an elderly woman introduced as Louise Pratt, my attorney of nearly 30 years. You never told me you had a lawyer, Claire said. Most adults do, I said. Louise placed a thick folder on the table. Hospital records, months of rehabilitation. You never told me it was this serious, Claire said. You were a child, I said. Letters, dozens, bearing the royal seal. Every Christmas, Aldrich said, I invited your father to visit, to accept our highest honors. He never answered. I thanked His Majesty each time and declined, I said. Louise opened another envelope. Cancelled checks, tuition statements, a property deed. This is Georgetown, my graduate tuition, Claire said. I thought scholarships covered everything. They covered most of it. The rest came from me. What house is this? I recognized it instantly. The small lake cabin Margaret and I had bought early in our marriage. You sold the lake house, Claire said, stunned. So you wouldn't need student loans. You told me you didn't like the place anymore. I lied, I said. Because parents are allowed to. Louise pulled out one final item, a blank white envelope. My wedding invitation, I said. You never got one, so I made one myself, left the date blank. I hoped maybe one day you'd call and tell me there'd been a mistake. Claire began crying again, harder this time. You really believed I'd invite you? Hope is stubborn. Nicholas spoke up. I owe you an apology too. I knew Claire was distant from her family and assumed there was a reason. There wasn't, he said, ashamed. There was only pride. King Aldrich chuckled. Titles reveal nothing, Nicholas. Character reveals character. Aldrich walked toward the window. People spend their lives trying to become important, he said. But Walter spent his life trying to become useful. Those are very different ambitions. He looked at Claire. You worried your father would embarrass you. I understand. Public life creates strange fears. But allow an old king some advice. The people who make us look ordinary are often the ones who made our lives extraordinary. Claire knelt beside my chair, taking my weathered hands into hers. Hands that had repaired fences, graded papers, cooked burned pancakes, held hers through grief, and quietly signed checks she'd never known existed. I don't deserve another chance, she whispered. Maybe not, I said, squeezing her fingers. But daughters aren't hired. They're loved. Can you ever forgive me? I forgave you before those guards ever knocked on my door. Why? Because I never stopped being your father. Outside, the cathedral bells rang softly. The ceremony was ready to begin again, not built on appearances this time, but on a family finally learning what real dignity looks like. As we stepped out together, Claire walked beside me, glancing at me every few steps as if afraid I might disappear. Inside, guests rose again as we entered, but this time, no one looked at crowns. They watched a father and daughter walking side by side. Then Claire suddenly stopped. I can't do this. She looked at the Archbishop. I'm not walking down that aisle yet. Something wrong, my child? Yes. I planned every flower, every guest, and somehow I forgot the one person who carried me through every important moment of my life. She walked to the microphone, live cameras rolling to millions. I believed titles mattered, appearances mattered, that people would judge me by where I came from. She looked at me. I was wrong. The man I was ashamed of is the man I should have been proudest to call my father. She turned to the Archbishop. I'd like to begin again. She walked to me and held out her hand. Dad, will you walk me down the aisle? For a second I couldn't answer, remembering another small hand reaching for mine. Claire at 5, her first day of kindergarten, terrified, whispering, "Don't let go until I tell you." I hadn't. 40 years later, she was asking the same thing. I'd be honored, I said. As the processional began again, Claire slipped her arm through mine. I'm scared, she whispered. So was I, the day your mother handed you to me in the hospital. Then I realized I didn't have to be perfect. I just had to keep showing up. I'm sorry I stopped, she said. I won't again. We walked down the aisle slowly, every face blurred except Claire's. At the altar, she hugged me before taking Nicholas's hands. I cannot promise Claire a life without mistakes, Nicholas said. But I promise she will never have to choose between her family and me. Take care of each other, I said. We will. Before the ceremony resumed, King Aldrich stood one final time. An official brought forward a velvet case, holding the Order of St. Leopold, Larenthia's highest civilian honor. You refused this in 1984, and again in 1989, and again, he said. I'm too old to keep chasing you. So today, I'm no longer asking. Do I have a choice? I asked. No, he grinned. He pinned the medal to my jacket, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. My brother, he whispered. My friend, I answered. Shall we finally get these two married? The Archbishop said. The cathedral erupted in relieved laughter. I returned to the chair beside King Aldrich, not because I'd earned a royal place, but because an old friend refused to let me sit anywhere else. Watching Claire and Nicholas join hands, I wasn't thinking about the pain of being excluded anymore. I was thinking about how grateful I was that love had found its way back before it was too late. People asked afterward what it felt like standing beside a king. The truth disappointed most of them. The greatest moment of that day wasn't the medal or the applause. It was Claire quietly slipping her hand into mine as we walked out of the cathedral, just like she used to, without a single word. That was when I knew I had my daughter back. The newspapers had a field day. One studio offered $500,000 for my story. I turned down every offer. I'd spent 40 years avoiding attention. Besides, there was still that fence behind the barn. A week later, I drove my old truck to the grocery store. Nothing had changed. Old Mr. Whitfield cornered me in the parking lot. You planning on telling me why half of Europe showed up at your house? It's a long story, I said. You still coming to Poker Friday? Wouldn't miss it. That conversation meant more than any royal ceremony. Claire called that Sunday. Can I come by? You never have to ask. Nicholas climbed out carrying grocery bags of steaks. We spent the afternoon grilling, and Nicholas insisted on helping fix the fence, hitting his own thumb with the hammer while Claire laughed so hard she nearly dropped the lemonade. Those Sundays became a tradition. Claire started helping in Margaret's old flower garden. I kept telling myself I'd come next month, she said. Then, after the wedding, I almost waited too long. Close isn't the same as too late, I told her. A month later, King Aldrich sent a handwritten letter. For 40 years I believed you saved my life. Now I realize you saved my son's future as well. Your friend, Aldrich. I folded it and placed it in Margaret's old recipe box. Some things don't belong on walls. They belong close to the heart. 6 months after the wedding, Claire and Nicholas invited me to Laurentia. No ceremony this time, just family. The king insisted on cooking breakfast himself, and it was terrible, burned on one side, raw on the other. We sat on the palace terrace talking about grandchildren, fishing, gardens, ordinary things. The happiest families aren't the ones without mistakes. They're the ones willing to admit them. Back home, I unpacked one souvenir, a family photo taken after the wedding. I placed it on the mantel above Margaret's fireplace, where it still sits. Every morning when I pour my coffee, I see it. And I remember that forgiveness doesn't erase yesterday. It gives tomorrow a chance. If this story leaves you with one thought, let it be this. The people who love us most are often the ones we take for granted, because we assume they'll always be there. Don't wait for a tragedy or a second chance to tell someone what they mean to you. Sometimes one honest phone call is all it takes to change a life.